You still, for some reason, weren't ready for this. Is that not enough training? Is that not enough appropriate scanning of people to make sure they have the kind of attitude, the kind of personality, the kind of characteristics that can handle this kind of heat? All right, guys, so look, everyone knows about the ICE situation going on in Minnesota right now. Everybody knows how much of a hot topic it is. It's all over the news, all over social media. But today, what I wanted to talk about is particularly the fact that it looks like some Republicans are even pushing back against some of what ICE is doing, at least. And on top of that, we're going to talk about some interesting polling numbers because I think they not only potentially show that some independents, particularly independents is what I want to focus on, are not pleased with Trump, but it also shows some kind of weird gaps with independents in the polling that I think could really show a potential window for the Democrats to really do something with this information. But first, let's take a look at this article from ABC. So this was written a few days ago, so obviously there could be some important information updated. This is from January 25th, but let's look at this headline. Republican calls are growing for a deeper investigation into the Minneapolis shooting. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is read a little bit from the article itself. I might input a little bit of my own words here just to clarify who's who and that kind of thing. But first, let's start with Senator Lisa Murkowski. So the article states, Senator Lisa Murkowski called for an investigation and added that, quote, ICE agents do not have carte blanche in carrying out their duties, end quote. Then you have Senator Susan Collins, and the article notes that she is the only incumbent Republican senator facing re-election in a state Democrat Kamala Harris carried in 2024. And it continues that she said a probe is needed, quote, to determine whether or not excessive force was used in a situation that may have been able to be diffused without violence, end quote. And then it continues a little more. While calling for protesters to, quote, keep space, end quote, from law enforcement and not interfere, Collins said federal law enforcement must, quote, recognize both the public's right to protest and the highly charged situation they now face, end quote. And then the last one here, this will be the last one we mention, but this one in particular, you should take note of because it's someone who ABC notes as a staunch ally of President Trump. So even Senator Pete Rickens, he is from Nebraska, and as I said, the article states he's a staunch ally of President Donald Trump, called for a, quote, prioritized, transparent investigation. And I want you to pay attention to that theme of like transparent investigations, because frankly, that's the biggest issue I have with ICE right now. Is there's so many situations that come up. That came up with, Renee Good. It came up with Alex Preddy, where you just feel like, man, when are they going to give us good information about what actually happened? When are they going to say, yeah, we're going to let an independent investigator come in? Now, I saw a little bit about, it looks like they may be doing that or may consider that or something like that. But either way, it's like one of the things it's like, okay, let's say an independent investigator does come in and then they find somebody, not guilty. Well, I got to be honest, I don't know if that's going to matter all that much for ICE, even if it is an independent investigation, because they've done so much to damage their reputation. On the other hand, if that kind of investigation does find that ICE is doing something wrong, well, then you're just in a situation where it's like, why did they do that? Why did you allow this? Was the training sufficient? All that kind of shit. So again, it looks like even some of the Republican Party is not happy with what Donald Trump and ICE or whatever, they're just not happy with the situation. They are offering some kind of pushback, some kind of need to fix the situation, whatever you want to call it, even in the Republican Party. I think that's noteworthy. Not only that, let's take a look at these polls here. Hey guys, just real quick, wanted to add some important context for the YouGov/Economist poll. I'm just reading here from YouGov. It states 3/4 of respondents started this week's survey after the shooting of Alex Preddy. For the Ipsos/Reuters poll, it states that among the 1,139 U.S. adults who were involved in it, 829 took the survey before the news of the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, and 310 took the survey after the news of the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. So again, just good context there. Thanks for watching. Let's look at this from YouGov. Confidence in ICE has declined most among independents. 67% now say they have very little confidence in the agency, up from 49% in December. That difference to me seems huge. We're talking about an 18% jump. 18%. We're still in January. Now, look, I don't know if this is taken from the beginning of December to I think this polling was done. I think it has the date here, but whatever. Regardless, the point, even if it's like the beginning of December to end of January, that's a jump. That's a huge jump. That's a huge jump. And it's really interesting to look at. If you look at these numbers here, they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And so this is a huge red flag for Trump. It is a huge red flag for the Republican Party. All right, so let's continue here. Majorities of Democrats, 80%, and independents, 56%, want ICE spending to be decreased. Now, I want to point out a little bit of an oddity here, because how is it that 67% of independents say they have very little confidence in ICE, yet only 56% of independents want ICE funding to be decreased? How is that? There's an 11% difference there. And I think what this might potentially show is there's some people that like ICE per se among independents, but don't like specifically how they're acting currently, or at least at the time of taking this poll. Now, look, if there's something I'm doing wrong there with the math, if those percentages don't add up, there's some kind of factor I'm not considering, please let me know. Leave a comment down below. But I do think it's a really interesting implication to speak about. And it's actually not the last time we're going to see that type of implication. And we'll get to that in a second because we're going to move from YouGov to Reuters. All right, so now from Reuters, views of immigration enforcement remain sharply divided along partisan lines. 92% of Democrats, not that much of a surprise to me, and 63% of independents, say ICE efforts have gone too far, while 55% of Republicans say they are about right. So again, a really high number of independents here. But similar to the YouGov, there's some kind of weird polling thing going on here, because let's take a look at this next question. In your opinion, which political party has a better plan, policy, or approach to immigration? Among independents, 22% say the Democratic Party, 25% say the Republican Party, 12% say other, 6% skipped, but 35% say they don't know. 35%. So there's a couple things here. One, technically speaking, the Republicans are ahead of the Democrats in this question. And that might blow your mind because it's like, well, wait a second. 63% of independents say ICE efforts have gone too far. Now, how is that possible? And the Republicans can have this kind of advantage. And there's this amount of people saying they don't know. How is that possible? How? It seems so odd. And again, I think we're in a similar situation with the YouGov poll. Now, before we get to that, I do want to note that these numbers may have dropped for the Republicans among independents because the Reuters article about the poll did say that Americans continue to prefer the approach of the Republican Party, 37% over the Democratic Party, 32% on immigration, R+5. But this margin is the narrowest it has been in Ipsos surveys over the last year. It continues on. In December, Americans preferred the Republican Party on immigration by 40% to 30%, R+10. It's not clear to me. It's not clear to me if this applies to independents as well. I just didn't have time to completely look into that. But back to my previous point, these numbers are wild to me. The discrepancy here is just so weird. How can you have, like I said, that many people of independents answering one way, but then so many people still saying they don't know, or the Republican Party even leading, right? Or I guess both of those things are happening. But I think the implication here, like I said, is similar to the YouGov poll, which is that there is potentially a group of people here who don't necessarily like what ICE is doing, but they want reasonable immigration reform. They don't like what they see, but that doesn't mean that they're just like not caring about immigration at all. They still care. They still want to have a reasonable immigration policy. And it also kind of implies potentially that the Democrats aren't doing enough for these people. So if you're the Democrats, you have got to look at these numbers as an opportunity to increase how much voters like you, how much voters enjoy what you're doing on immigration. You've got to look at these numbers and consider that as a possibility for the Democrats. You have to. Because look at that discrepancy. Look at that discrepancy. So much dislike for what ICE is doing, yet you can't sway 35% of the I don't knows? Why is that? Why is that? There's something going wrong there. Now, maybe it's the education of the American public. Maybe it's people not fully understanding the news in front. Right, there could be all kinds of factors. But you cannot look at this as the Democrats and say, nothing to this. We're good. You just can't. You cannot reasonably do that. You just can't. And look, like I said, I didn't have time to fully look into this, so maybe that number is also changing for independents. Maybe that number is getting better for the Democrats. But still, you have to look at this as an opportunity for the Democrats to do something more, to do something with this. So the question is, what are they going to do with that chance? It seems like Chuck Schumer is taking a little bit of a stand. I'll put his tweet up here. And this actually appears to be a day before this article was written. He says, what's happening in Minnesota is appalling and unacceptable in any American city. Democrats sought common sense reforms in the Department of Homeland Security spending bill. But because of Republicans' refusal to stand up to President Trump, the DHS bill is woefully inadequate to rein in the abuses of ICE. I will vote no. Senate Democrats will not provide the votes to proceed to the appropriations bill if the DHS funding bill is included. So look, I don't know the exact implications of that, but it seems like he's standing up to Trump, to ICE, to the immigration strategy, whatever you want to say, to some degree. But again, this, like, if you're going to do this, it has to continue. You have to show the American people that you're serious about showing them, look, we get it. You don't like this. We're going to stop it. But also, here's some reasonable immigration reform, whatever that might look like. I mean, frankly, look, if you wanted to go after the worst of the worst, if you want to not let them in, if you wanted to fairly deport them for whatever reason, assuming they're not already going through some kind of process that's working, no problem with that. No problem with that. But the issue, obviously, is that ICE they just have such a bad reputation because of their lack of transparency. Now, we already talked about that a little bit, so I won't go down too much in that rabbit hole. But interestingly, also in that article that we were reading about from ABC, there was something about the NRA speaking up about this, and it's like, first of all, I want to make a whole video on that, because if you've got the NRA speaking up, dude, you're in a bad place. You know that's like, oh shit, red flag, something's going on here. Like, come on. So you have Schumer taking this stance, but then you have Trump, who actually looks like he could be backing down a little bit. Let's take a look at this from CNN.
I've been paying attention to what's happening in Minnesota. There's a really notable phone call that just happened this morning between President Trump and Governor Tim Walz. President Trump first alerted us to it, saying that they had a good call, and he described that the two leaders were on the same wavelength, which obviously is a notable comment given all the criticisms coming from the White House of Governor Tim Walz. And according to the readout that I just got from Governor Walz's office, they say that during this conversation between President Trump and Governor Walz, that the president agreed to consider reducing the number of federal agents who were in his state. That would be a huge change if so, given we've seen this massive surge of agents that have been on the ground in Minnesota, something that actually only increased after the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent, and now with the second shooting of Alex Preddy over the weekend. And in this call, Governor Walz says the president also agreed to consider having the Department of Homeland Security allow an independent investigation. Governor Walz said that the president said he would talk to DHS about ensuring that the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension is able to conduct that independent investigation, which so far state officials have said they've not been able to do. Now, that doesn't mean these two things will happen, but the idea that the president is considering it and also sending in his own border czar, Tom Homan, into Minnesota seems to suggest to us that the president may be looking for an off-ramp, as his administration has been facing major backlash over what officials said immediately after the death of Alex Preddy over the weekend, including claims by some top officials calling him a domestic terrorist and an assassin.
So, I mean, look, guys, this administration is not looking good on this topic. They're just not. The Alex Preddy situation, the Renee Good situation, that situation was horrendous. Renee Good. There is no reason at all that cop should have even been, or agent, whatever you want to call it, that person should have been in front of the car that close to even make that situation dangerous. I mean, there's just no reason that I've seen. There's no reason that I've seen at all. Unless the only thing that would maybe change my mind is if you could show some angle with like another ICE agent about to be hit or something. But I have not seen that. I have not seen that. And again, what keeps coming up with ICE is that like, and by the way, even then I would question it because I'm not sure how smart it is to like shoot someone in a moving vehicle. I don't know the protocols of that. So I guess that theoretically could change my mind too and all that. But it just, I don't understand. I think if he would have just swung wider, they wouldn't even been in that situation. So that's the first thing. And again, it's like, why can't we know from their angle and not just some dude like putting up a phone? Why can't we know what exactly went on and have an independent investigation there? Like, has there been an independent investigation into Renee Good? I haven't seen it. But if not, like, that's horrendous. How are you going to act like that as the federal government? How? Then you have the Alex Preddy situation. Every single angle that I've seen on that looks incredibly suspicious. Now, I know there's been a little bit of, there's been some things said recently that it seems like they're like maybe saying like, yeah, maybe someone did something wrong. But again, like these investigations better happen. And they have got to be independent. Now, look, hopefully it seems like based on that CNN video there, it's going to be potentially independent, that they will at least consider it. That's got to happen. But look, again, even if that does happen, what is Trump going to do? What is ICE going to do at this point? An investigation has found, well, nothing actually happened, no wrongdoing. Like ICE has fucked themselves already in terms of trustworthiness, at least with some part of the population. All the population, I don't know, but at least with some part of it. And then, like I said earlier, the other end of that is, okay, let's say you did do something. How is that going to help you? It's not. Because then people are just going to be like, okay, thanks for the investigation. Now we found out you still fucking suck. You still, for some reason, weren't ready for this. Is that not enough training? Is that not enough appropriate scanning of people to make sure they have the kind of attitude, the kind of personality, the kind of characteristics that can handle this kind of heat? So it's like, it just, it feels like they have completely fucked themselves at this point. So, at least with some part of the population. I mean, look, guys, I'm down for these investigations, for independent investigations, to show something different. If you would have done an investigation into Renee Good and it was independent and they would have showed no wrongdoing, I would have been open to at least hearing about that, right? And you're talking to someone who it took like 2 weeks for me to have even a conclusion on Renee Good, okay? So if you think this is like some woke lefty opinion or whatever the fuck, you don't know who the fuck you're talking to, okay? I think about these things thoroughly. I don't come to conclusions quickly. I don't. Even with Alex Preddy, like, look, again, I would be open. If he was reaching for another agent's gun or something, show that. If he had 2 weapons on him or something, show that. But the issue is, when these videos look so terrible, and you don't have any kind of other group coming out and saying, like, here's what we found, we are for sure going to do this investigation. Like I said, maybe they are, maybe they're going to. Here's what here's this, here's the evidence, we got multiple teams. No, it's just like, what are we supposed to think when it looks this bad and you are hiding information? Even the most critical of person is going to be like, yeah, I mean, it's possible I don't know everything, but why the fuck aren't you telling me more? And look, with Preddy, even if there is an investigation that shows there was at least like 1 or 2 gunshots that were justified, because I frankly, I don't understand why you need more than that. Maybe that's just me being ignorant of these situations. I truly don't know. But even if it was, whatever the number is, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, even if that is justified for some reason, we find that out, there's still a question of like, why are ICE agents being so aggressive towards the woman Preddy was trying to help? What's the answer to that? Where's the body camera of that? Where's the full context? Like, how are you not just setting up and recording this whole thing? Like, how, like, that's gotta be the thing here. There has got to be more transparency. There just has to. But like I said, look, there may be an independent investigation in all this. I really hope there is. I hope we can get some answers out of this that are not just coming from, whatever the federal government says or whatever Trump says or whatever it was. We need some independent sources on this. So look, what do you guys think? Is Trump fucked here? Is the Republican loyalty to Trump fading? Whatever you guys think, let me know down in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But yeah, like I said, what do you think? Is Trump fucked? What's ICE going to do next? Is an investigation going to be worth it? Is an investigation going to make ICE look any better? What do we think of these polls? With these numbers, are the Democrats going to propose reasonable immigration reform? Are they going to stand up to Donald Trump in a way that independent voters like? We'll see.